It's body slams and sits baths. It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Hello and welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. My name is Bob Smith. I used to be with Pro Wrestling Illustrated. You know the drill, I guess. But anyway, I feel like I'm still with PWI and the Associated Magazines right now, because back in the day, I used to write a column in The Wrestler called Introducing, where it was all new stars, people that most people hadn't heard of until they saw them in the magazine. I feel now like I felt then, because I think I have found someone who really seems like he's on the right path to becoming a really major talent in pro wrestling. His name is Tyler Peters, and no, he's not a wrestler. He's not a wrestler, but he has designs on becoming a television commentator, and he already has a brand new podcast called Tyler's Takedowns. It's a production of the SJP World Media Network, and it's only just beginning for Tyler. I just have a really good vibe about this young man. I'm going to find out how old he is, where he's from, all that stuff. I know he's from Tennessee. That's about it. So enough of my yakking. I want to introduce you to somebody new, and after this interview, we're going to have more wrestling-related things afterwards. So hunker down. Here's Tyler Peters. Well, this is going to be a little bit of a different kind of a show here on the Outdated Hour, because we're going to talk to somebody young and someone who is, I guess, just kind of starting out on what I think is going to be a very promising career in broadcasting and podcasting. His name is Tyler Peters. He's from Tennessee. Hello, welcome to the show.
It is an honor to be on your show, Mr. Smith, and I can't wait to get into the discussion, but thank you for having me.
Well, you did it yourself. I know we talked a little bit on social media a couple of months ago, 3-4 months ago, something like that.
Yeah,
we talked about writing and stuff like that. You would ask me some questions, and I sent you back an email response to your queries and got to know you that way. But here's the thing. I just tuned into your podcast. By the way, his podcast is called Tyler's Takedowns. It's a production of the SJP World Media Network. You can get it. Where can they hear those podcasts, by the way?
They can hear it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and really Spotify is taking over Anchor.
Right.
So that's the major platforms. Everybody can check it out and listen to it. And thank you so much for talking about it, because it really means a lot coming from you and so many others who are supportive.
Well, no problem. Because, like I just told you off before we hit the record button, you deserve this spot, because I just get a vibe about you that you're just starting out and you're going to be around a long time. I get that feeling from your professionalism. Already, it's very obvious. You got a great delivery on your podcast. You know a lot about wrestling, and there's something there, man. There is something there about what you're putting together. And from what I can see, you seem to be a very pleasant, likable guy. So I'm glad to have you on the show. Welcome.
Well, hey, thank you. And once again, I appreciate the sincerity, and I can say the same about you. It's going to be a fun time. I always love joining fellow wrestling fans, and also somebody who has a wealth of knowledge like yourself. So I've been anticipating this with so much excitement. So once again, I appreciate it and want to express my gratitude to you.
No problem. I will say this. On a recent episode, I gave another podcast a little bit of a rub, and they took off. I don't know if I had anything to do with it, because it was Dan and Benny in the Rings podcast, and they had Steve Kern on at the very same time that I put an interview with them on the air, and their ratings just that week just shot up into like in the 60s. Really good job. There are hundreds and hundreds of wrestling podcasts. I mean, I chart most of the time. In fact, all the time. I'm happy just to be on the chart. I don't even care where I land. I've landed as high as like 32. I've been in the top 40 about 4 times. That's great, considering that I just
Well,
started
it
this thing
is. It's fantastic.
I just started it in January and everything's been going well. But podcasting is kind of hard, I'm finding out, because the scheduling of the interviews and finding people who want to be in the show or who even heard of you in the first place, and also the technical aspects of it. But you seem to have a company behind you. Is that right?
Yeah, they're a network and actually based over in the UK. I want to give them a lot of credit because they edit the podcast. That's why they're able to sound as good as they've been because of their hard work and diligence. And that's what I want to do is credit all those who have believed in me and letting me grow my talents, including yourself. And they're based out of the UK, but they have a lot of connections in North America. And I'm fortunate to be one of those. And it's just been a thrilling ride thus far. So I'm just very overjoyed with when I hear it and hear somebody of your caliber or anybody else compliment the podcast. I mean, it really moves me because I'm like you and so many. I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. I always look to grow and get better and do it the right way.
Well, I will say this. I tune in, right? I saw it listed near your name on some social media platform. So I tune in. And the first thing I noticed was this thing is brand new and it sounds like it's Mark Maron or something, or Joe Rogan. It sounds really good. I mean, the sonic quality of your show, and that means a lot to me because I used to be a musician, and I love sound. I love good sound. I like nice, clear sound. It sounds like the recording of a radio broadcast, and I can't give you a better compliment than that because it's so major league sounding. First off, and then on the edition that I heard, you started to go out. You started to review a pay per view, and I was like, wow. He's really got it going on here. You were just talking randomly, random subjects to the audience, and I was really entertained by it. So I knew you had knowledge. I knew you had passion for your subject, and I could hear you. just I could hear you really well. So I was really
Sure.
happy at the end, and it was a succinct, short podcast. I think it was 32 minutes or something like that, which I always get
Yeah,
a kick
they're
out of.
not lengthy at all.
Right, right.
Yeah, because I realized too, Bob, that a lot of our attention spans anymore, not knocking the podcasts that go an hour or 2 hours, but uh, honestly, if I can get my point across and make it enjoyable and listenable to the audience, then that's the whole goal. And so that's why it's kind of, for whatever reason, has been 25 minutes to almost half an hour.
That's how I started too. I started this one with shorter shows until you know what? Like they said in the movie Babe, I had to find my feet. I had to figure out what I was going to do and what kind of formats. But once I got in, the first couple of shows were solo. So once I started to do interviews, I'd let the time go and not worry about it because it's like if the conversation goes into a nice direction, let it flow. Just let it go, And that's what you and I will do
Absolutely.
here. Who knows what we'll end up talking about by the time this is finished. But in the meantime, tell me about your wrestling background, how you got involved with pro wrestling, why you got into it now. What's going on?
Well, I've always been a lifelong wrestling fan. Ever since I was a kid, there was just something about pro wrestling that enamored me. uh, Back during the early to mid 90s when I started to understand the mentality and the psychology came later on at the age I am now. But as a kid, it was just those larger than life characters. Not only were there massive guys, but even like some of the lightweights. I mean, just a lot of weight classes similar to a lot of sports, and I miss the sports presentation. I realize it's entertainment, but I always was fascinated by the storytelling process in pro wrestling. So, what got me into broadcasting and commentating was thankfully through podcasts. I made a connection with a promotion out of Florida. They are doing some amazing things on the independent scene, but they've featured a lot of tremendous professional wrestlers. And the name of that promotion is Coastal Championship Wrestling. I believe they are on their 19th year. Gangrel trains the wrestlers. If you remember him from the Brood, the WWE, and I believe he was in Stu Hart's promotion in Calgary as one of the Black Hearts. And then they've also had Kevin Sullivan. I mean, my goodness, the Taskmaster. Talk about a wealth of knowledge. And they've had Bill Alfonso from ECW. He was a longtime ref in Florida. I had to research these things. And Bruce Owens, who's also was a one of those referees who was legendary. I don't think just in Florida, but I'm sure they traveled all over the United States, and who knows, probably internationally, I'm sure. So it's just really neat, some of the connections or people you know of that may know them, even if you don't on a personal level. And that's what led me on my path or journey per se to pursue this broadcasting opportunity. As a child, I always wanted to either do baseball, basketball, some kind of sport, including wrestling. I know there's a difference, but in the scheme of things, it was just something that I felt in my heart I wanted to do. And it would be so funny. I could be watching like a baseball game, and my mother recalls this memory, and I have to laugh about it now. But I used to have these toy wrestling figures, and I could be watching something totally different, but I would be trying to commentate as I was playing with those figures. So I could already tell that it was in me that I wanted to take this seriously, and I'm always willing to learn. And with each opportunity that, thanks to CCW, I've been able to receive that, and it's just it's meant the world to me to have people like yourself comment and be so encouraging, because I do have a love for this stuff. Even if I'm critical like anybody, there's always been an underlying passion that's been deep down inside of myself, and I'm sure so many others. So I know it went lengthy there, but I was trying to kind of explain the backstory of what got me and kind of led me down the road to pursue broadcasting.
No, that's fine. But I'm glad you brought up Coastal Championship Wrestling, and I'll tell you why. Once I knew I was going to talk to you, I started scouring the web for clips to watch it.
Okay.
I'm a hard grader when it comes to indie stuff. I mean this, and I'm not blowing smoke at you. It looked really good. It looked like the wrestling that I grew up watching, first of all. Secondly, the wrestlers looked like wrestlers. Third, I saw rules being enforced.
Oh, they did.
Knocked me down with the feather, man. Rules were being enforced. It was great.
I know.
So I want to give them a shout out too. Coastal Championship Wrestling, this stuff looks really good.
Oh, they're doing tremendous, and like you said, they're going back to kind of the territory style, and they've got some of these new talents, but I think they're doing it right. Like you said, it doesn't look, no offense, just like another indie promotion.
Mhm.
They're trying to make it somewhat semi-professional with the camera work, the production values, including what you see in the ring. So I know they'll be appreciative of the shout out. And hey, I'm partial and biased. There's a lot of great promotions in my home state of Tennessee, but as far as the Southeast and wherever else I'm at, I'm always going to be promoting CCW.
Yeah, I can see why. You know what? My intelligence didn't feel betrayed when I watched it. You know what I mean?
Insulted.
You know what I mean? I didn't feel insulted. Yeah. Some of this indie stuff. First of all, too many of the indies are just blood circuses, and I don't agree with that. I don't believe in death matches either. I'm sorry, I'm not into
Or
it.
they're jumping off a basketball goal, doing some crazy stuff that's not necessary. It ruins the storytelling of the matchup. I'm with you.
And you know, here's why I don't like it. I'm not really offended by it, but I'm going to be doggone offended when there's a headline somewhere from this country that somebody had an arm ripped off or died doing a stupid stunt. And I don't want to talk like that, but it could happen. And the chances are it really could happen if this stuff keeps going on. I'm the worst critic when it comes to deathmatch wrestling. It's like 15 steps too far as I'm concerned. And you know, I was involved with early ECW. I don't know if you know that. I was their first.
I didn't.
I was their first TV announcer. Believe this or not, on their first local Philadelphia TV shows. Todd Gordon asked me if I would host, and I did for a while. So we all see what ECW became, and they became mostly famous, you know, blood
for the hardcore.
But they were at least nuanced. You could still see scientific matches on one of those shows, and they had stars that came in from, you know, like Eddie Guerrero and stuff like that, and you know, Rey Mysterio. Shane Douglas, exactly. They made Shane Douglas a world champion when nobody else saw it in him, which I thought was great. So
I thought it was innovative.
Oh, I do too. So to make a long story short, a lot of people who never have been in the wrestling business started to get in the wrestling business by promoting bad taste. I hate to say it, bad taste, and lots of it. There's some indie federations. I don't know how they get booked in VFW halls because they look like nothing but horror movies if you've seen the posters for them online.
To your point, I think that's where CCW separates themselves. And once again, I'm not taking shots at other independent wrestling promotions. There's still a few out there, including CCW. But it's thanks to having a Kevin Sullivan or a Gangrel. I think like a Dr. Tom Pritchard, he's going to train those men and women correctly. I mean, Paige
Mm-hmm.
Van Zant has actually received her training in Gangrel. And there's been a lot of big names that have passed through there, whether seen in AEW, WWE, or Impact, and they still want to come back, even if they're busy on their schedules. They find a way to where they are booked on their big programs because they run a lot more shows in Florida. But Nashville is what's helpful for me because they're closer to my home area,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where the commentary journey has progressed over the span of about almost 4 years now, going back to 2020. I actually got an opportunity to ring announce, which was pretty bad, but hey, that's how you learn. And then commentary, thankfully for it, I'm doing a little better each and every time. There's always rooms for improvement because I'll go back and listen as much as I hate to. It's like I need to do it. Uh, that way I can grow. And there'll be certain points where I go, that was okay, but it could have been better than other terms that I'll use and go, stuff to work on. Just got to keep at it. Can't be too negative, but you got to keep at it.
Hey, I tried it too. I did some play-by-play on early Eastern Championship Wrestling matches that ended up on the WWE Network, and I didn't even know they were going to be
no
on there.
way.
Yeah, they're not there now. They used to have a section called Hidden Gems, and it was the earliest Todd Gordon ECW, and myself and Stately Wayne Manor, who used to work for Wrestling World, were doing. He was the color guy, and I thought it was. I thought I was terrible, and I walked away from it. I really did. I just said he can do better than this. But the beauty part is they hired a friend of mine named Joey Styles not long after that, and that rest was history.
I love Joey Styles.
Yeah. He worked for PWI. There's another thing you may not know. He worked for PWI for a while. Yeah, he worked in our offices. So I was so proud. I've never been so outwardly happy to step away from something, given the way that it worked out. So it worked out great for everybody.
Yeah, Joey Styles. And to your point, I think the presentation ECW provided, it worked. It fit with Joey Styles the way that he could kind of get away with the overtop commentary a little bit because a lot of the spots they were doing. So
craziness.
That is so neat. I didn't know he worked at the same magazine you did.
Mm-hmm.
So
for a very brief,
wrestling is a small world.
It was a very brief period of time. I remember he was a heel columnist in one of our magazines. I don't remember which magazine it was. We had a new magazine. I think we had a magazine at the end of my tenure there called Wrestling's Bad Guys. And it was the first wrestling magazine to take the heel's perspective throughout the entire magazine. Because before that, if you go back to the history of the GC London publications, it was always, this villain must be stopped or else wrestling shall perish. It was really, really mock serious in the late 60s to about 1980. Oh, the dastardly doings of, Kurt Von Hess must be abolished. It was always good guy. And just damn the bad guys in every issue. They got more journalistic as PWI took hold past 1979, and the whole flavor of the books changed. But for the longest time, it was all good guy. But that book, Wrestling's Bad Guy, was the first to be nothing but heel commentary, even heel ratings. So it was a good book. And Joey had his own column in that magazine, and I was so happy. I believe I was there the day that Paul Heyman, who had stopped by the offices, and Joey met. I was there that day. Magic. It was just magic days.
What a cool moment.
It really was. Really, you never knew who was going to stop in. Bill Apter knew everybody. You never knew what wrestler would just come popping in to say hello. It was a job unlike any other in the country, I'm sure.
Yeah, Bill Apter is amazing. To your observation, and to know that you were there when Paul Heyman was meeting with Joey Styles, because I've often heard, speaking of broadcasting, that Paul Heyman learned a lot under Jim Ross, and he was passing down a lot of what he had comprehended from JR to Joey Styles. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure that's got to have some truth to it, knowing how Heyman started out kind of in the later years of NWA, WCW, working with JR, and then later on they would, I think, did a WrestleMania. Maybe I'm wrong on that, and you can help correct me.
I think that's right.
I believe they actually tried them.
But let me ask you something. Since you're venturing out into commentary, who are your commentary heroes? Who are the ones you've enjoyed throughout your years of watching wrestling?
Well, I gave one away with Jim Ross, especially, and a lot of people. Let me go back. I know everybody loves Attitude Era stuff, which was iconic, but I prefer his WCW broadcasting a little bit, and NWA when he came to Crockett, and even Mid South a little bit. I always admire going back and watching the territories, and Lance Russell in Memphis was always smooth, and Bob Caudle with Mid Atlantic, and that's some of the ones I have more of a familiar kind of feeling on, and also Tony Schiavone early on with Crockett. But to me, it was always Jr., Jim Ross, or Lance Russell, Bob Caudle. And I had to go back and research a lot of the territorial guys because I wasn't as aware of course, their immense talents. But when you go back and watch those Memphis shows, and I'm not going to try to copy from them, but I definitely am influenced. So I would definitely watch them and try to do the homework. And the way Lance Russell and Dave Brown would communicate and do the interviews was just second to none. So I think Lance Russell, a lot of those guys need to be in the Hall of Fame. They don't get enough accolades. Even Tony Schiavone said, why should I go, pardon me, in the WWE Hall of Fame if Bob Caudle's not there? That's who he grew up on. So, I mean, and I'm with him. I think you got to put the guys that paved the way in there first, and then if you have enough tenure, then, hey, then you deserve your shot. So I agree with that statement he made.
There have been a lot of great announcing duos, but my personal favorite, and you'll be shocked to hear me because when I started with PWI in 1988, we did a lot of tape trading, and I instantly, now that I had access to it, fell in love with Memphis. Just fell in love with it. And I was lucky to spend a whole week there in 1991 following him around and attending the cards.
I'm
great.
Jealous of you already.
Yeah, but at that point, Lance had taken a job with WCW or the NWA, whatever they called it at that point. But in any event, I got to meet and talk to Dave Brown. But I will say this. The duo of Lance Russell and Dave Brown were the most unique styled announcers, I think, in wrestling history as a duo because you got the feeling they were talking directly to you at home, both of them. They had that magic about them that whatever they were expressing, be it outrage or admiration or something humorous would go on, you got the feeling that they were trying to literally talk directly to you as opposed to reading copy of a card somewhere. And I think they were the warmest wrestling duo I ever heard. You really felt that they loved what they were doing and they enjoyed the fans too. I remember being in Memphis and having Jerry Jarrett tell me, yeah, we love our fans. We were trying to keep them here because, that was the expansion period, with WWE and everything like that.
Yeah.
But Dave Brown and Lance Russell, my gosh, man, you can't top them. Just my opinion.
Oh, no. And to your point, they were very, very welcoming, and you can't beat that. And their chemistry, the way they made you feel like you were a part without trying to outdo one another or talk to you like they were above you. I think that's a lost art that I'm starting to understand a little bit. I'm not saying I'm an expert because I'm still learning on what not to do, but you can take a lot of just important information from all of these legendary Hall of Famers.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you listen to Lance Russell or Dave Brown or the two of them in tandem, you thought what you were watching was real. That's all I have to say.
No, you did. They made you believe. Yeah,
absolutely, they did. There was not an inkling of wisecracking or winking commentary. I'll put it that way. They were talking in plaintive tones about the actions they were seeing and the angles, and Eric Embry was a heel at that point and was booking the place. And I'll tell you, magic, man. Just to be able to go there and hang out a week and see a couple of, I think I saw 3 cards in total. I'll never forget it the rest of my life. And Jerry Lawler was so accommodating to me, and so was Jerry Jarrett. It was absolutely fantastic. I mean, to me, Dirty White Boy Tony Anthony and Kimberly and Dr. Tom Pritchard and superstar Bill Dundee and Tojo Yamamoto and Chris Candido was young, and at that point he was there. Down the list, Robert Fuller, Jeff Jarrett. They were the tag team champions at that point. What a time. What a time. What can I tell you?
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm envious because those are all just legendary names, and Lance Russell too during the interviews would make you suspend your disbelief because he would even call out the Hills a little bit, but say it out of respect because it was about the issues that make professional wrestling. And to your point, Jerry Jarrett said that I watched the Tell of the Territories. And found a lot of the foundation of what made the territories, especially from a Memphis perspective, and talking about even Jerry Jarrett breaking away from the Goulas family because that I remember his mom, which I had to go back and do my homework, actually was the first promoter out of his family, and
Right.
so I mean, so Jeff's generational lineage is very fascinating, and it's listening to Jim Cornette, it was funny because Jim, he's outspoken, and I tend to agree with him, but he even says, "What is Jeff thinking?" He ought to know better because Jim learned under that learning tree, and whether people like Cornette or not, the man knows his stuff.
Oh,
I
heck
mean, I
yeah.
may not always agree with him, but I do see his point, and that I've even got one of his shirts and I made the mistake of posting it on Twitter. Of course, people were calling me out. I didn't care, but
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, listen, that's going to come with controversy. I know he's very outspoken, but I wish I was a little bit more like that, to be honest with you. So I know it's a point of reference, but everybody's going, well, why is he bringing up Cornette? But if you follow the Tennessee territory, that's where Cornette and like Jimmy Hart, a lot of these just icons began their careers.
Right. I'll tell you what, Jim Cornette and Brian Last, the only people that can do a 3-hour podcast and make every second worth it. That's my opinion.
Oh, they did.
They are so
I mean,
far.
I'm engaged.
They're so far out and above anything else that's out there. They're my favorite. And I've determined, and I said this on the show before, Jim Cornette is now, as I age, probably my favorite wrestling personality in my lifetime because he's the only one I can think of. When offered stuff that was lousy, he said, no, every time. He left organizations rather than do dumb stuff. He kept his pro wrestling integrity about him from then till now. Say what you want about his flippant comments and his sense of humor. I don't care about that stuff. All I know is he's a wrestling genius, and I admire him more than I can even express because he has integrity when it comes to professional wrestling and the art of it and the skill of it and the history of it.
It's always like an encyclopedia.
Oh, yeah.
I love the deep dives. So speaking of Memphis and stuff, I'll even listen to those. Forget all the modern day stuff, even though there's some of it I do enjoy. But give me like where he was working with Jerry Jarrett or Mid Atlantic or Mid South under Bill Watts, that kind of stuff I'm in for because it's a learning experience for me as well as somebody who came along later as a wrestling fan. It made me want to go back and watch Mid South and the Memphis stuff, like you were saying, and Mid Atlantic where Flair was starting to catch on fire after he was in the tag team with Valentine. I didn't even realize he and Valentine were tag team champions because I knew studying Flair, I knew he went back to Vern Gagne. He had trained originally in AWA and then came to Crockett, though. That's where the Nature Boy became a star, though, is under Crockett. So all the parallels, I know I'm kind of going all over the place.
No, I love it. And I'll tell you why, because I want to interject, because in 1975, I guess it was in the Mid-Atlantic. I could be wrong about the territory, but they formed a tag team with older Rip Hawk and younger Ric Flair. And Flair used to wear these big oversized sunglasses. He was very flamboyant, whereas Hawk was more meat and potatoes rough guy. But they were like peanut butter and jelly. They were a perfect tag team. Even their names were this Rip Hawk, Ric Flair. And that was in 75, and they won some championships together. But that, I believe, was the infancy of the stardom of Ric Flair, going all that way. I think that's pre-plane crash, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I believe you. I mean, because you definitely know your stuff. So, and I know that changed how Flair would return. But, to think he should even survive that, or a lot of these wrestlers are just celebrities that have went through a lot of, like a plane crash, for example, is remarkable to think about
Oh,
how much more of a career he was able to enjoy afterward.
people don't even think about that horrible plane crash that took lives, and he was lucky to escape with his life. And the fact that he was able to retrain and get his body in shape and become a bigger star after that period. I mean, you could see a fellow go, I don't want to do this anymore. It's too dangerous. I don't want to fly any planes anymore. You know, all that kind of thing. But he stuck with it and became probably one of the 5 most legendary wrestlers of all time. There's no question about it in my mind.
He's got to be. And somebody to actually live up to the Nature Boy gimmick, I think we talked about it before you started recording. Buddy Rogers, who was the original Nature Boy, you saw a lot of the influence by Buddy Rogers on the Next Generation. Ric Flair, one of those examples. Even though if you hear the stuff on Flair, he goes back to Ray Stevens, though, the Crippler, about taking the bump over the top rope, and to me, Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel. When I think of Ric Flair, to me, another guy that I hold in high regard. Going back watching his matches, I'm like, this is wrestling. This is storytelling. Watching a Ric Flair Nick Bockwinkel match, because Bockwinkel could work with anybody. It didn't matter. They could be a little hardcore or a brawler or a technician. And to me, that's a sign of a pro, when you can adapt to anybody's style. And Nick Bockwinkel, and Flair said this, because I got to credit his podcast. It's not like I know all this stuff, but he was even saying Nick taught him how to dress, wear the suits. To be a champion, you want to look like a champion. He's like, I got a lot of my stuff from Nick. I have to give him a lot of credit.
Yeah. Oh gosh, talk about another standard bearer, Nick Bockwinkel, exactly. And the pairing of Bockwinkel with Bobby Heenan was like gold.
It was magic.
First of all, they could both talk like crazy, and it was never an interview like Nick Bockwinkel. You would insist that what you were watching was a legitimate sport after he talked. It was never, I'm going to rip you apart and do all this. He would go off. Nick Bockwinkel's interviews were unlike anybody else in that he would, I don't know. It was kind of like he had 3 different sides to his brain. He would talk about, well, safety says I shouldn't take a match like this, but I'll explain exactly why. And then he would, because he was going against Billy Robinson or something like that, who was the size of a tree, and he was, I shouldn't take a match like, but I'll explain why I can beat him. And he would. And then he would, So, yeah, there was nobody like Nick Bockwinkel, because it's a great name to bring up in terms of the realistic portrayal of an athlete, professional wrestler. There's just no question about it.
Yeah, Bockwinkel had it down, and to me, that set a precedent that even Ric Flair would borrow from it, and he also influenced the Next Generation. So it's amazing, the domino effect, and that all these great champions borrow from it. And Nick Bockwinkel, to your point, him and Heenan, Bockwinkel was already articulate, but you had the comedic side, but it wasn't even WWF comedic then. Bobby Heenan was a little bit more serious, but he could throw in the jabs. That's what I do admire about the differences in AWA Bobby Heenan compared to when it got more the glitzier side of the old WWF.
Oh, AWA Heenan was great with a jibe, but he was all business. And one of the best light heavyweight wrestlers you will ever see, that people forget that about Heenan, is that, oh my gosh, was he good in the ring? He really was. Have you ever had any chance to see him in the ring? I've never seen a guy fly over the top rope more realistically than Bobby Heenan. Unbelievable.
He's amazing, and that's what people don't understand. Not only was he a great manager or whatever role you needed him to be, whether talk for his client, he was also a great wrestler in his own right. And I love diving into the history like yourself about how they got their start. How did they break into the industry? And Bobby Heenan said I was picking up the wrestlers. I was also carrying around their ring attire. I was doing a lot of those kind of small jobs, and then had to work my way up and earn their respect and get matches under my belt. And there you go. And his career started just ascending, essentially.
And it never stopped ascending until he decided to retire. That was really it. I mean, even when he went to WCW on commentary, he was irreplaceable. He just was. What a legend he was.
Commentary. Speaking of broadcasting, Bobby Heenan, you don't get much better than that, if not any better. I mean, he was truly one of a kind. I mean, and that's safe to say. And
easily the funniest color commentator of all time. He was legitimately funny.
when he said that Reba McEntire, I was going back watching the old WrestleManias from even the '90s, and he was calling her Tito Santana's sister. I died laughing. I thought that was hilarious. Just the timing of it. It came out of nowhere, but because it was Bobby Heenan, it worked.
Right,
Not
right.
anybody could get away with such a remark, but hey, leave it to the brain. He could do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was another innovative thing. Figure the old, I guess it was called Primetime Wrestling with Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, which was essentially a comedy show between matches. Wrestling had never been presented like that before.
No, and that's what I'm starting to comprehend what Vince's vision with, having programming is to kind of showcase more, I guess, the character development in a different way. Even though it kind of went against the grain of kind of like his father and some of the old school promoters. I respect Vince's vision, uh, but that's where a lot of people were starting to rebel because going back to Cornette's point, a lot of people viewed NWA as the real stuff, compared to the kind of the showmanship of taking nothing away from the Northeast WWF. But you hear a lot of the comparisons with territories like they're definitely going Hollywood here, where we're still trying to keep it in the ring and do our stuff. Speaking of the NWA and other promotions similar to it.
Right. I always thought that WCW's fatal mistake was trying to mimic the WWF. They had their own flavor, and they all had big stars: Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, Terry Taylor, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard. Go down the list, depending on what year you're talking about. Barry Windham, on and on and on.
Oh my gosh, just
And
all
it
just
was just,
tremendous.
and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Brian Pillman, keep going. I mean, Tom Singh, you just keep going down the list. And if they had simply, I think, stuck to the old 605 style, they'd probably still be around today. I really mean that. Now, the
No,
problem
I
was
mean
that
they
the
were trying to
problem,
copy.
well, there's the thing. Everybody saw the Golden Goose with WWF, but wasn't there room for something a little different without mimicking it? I think that was the cardinal mistake when they started to bring in characters as opposed to established stars. And, Van Hammer, and there was
Yeah,
that period, but
then
the
you could
period
tell
when
they were mimicking
they were
kind of the
definitely.
sports entertainment.
Yeah, and they had a guy like Billy Jack Haynes. They came in under a cowl, and they called him Black Blood. I mean, it was on down to this Glacier. It just kept going and going and
Yeah,
going.
Glacier was a talented guy, but just not the right gimmick. And that's one thing I will say. They were trying to be different even with Nitro and stuff. But that's the thing. To your point, they were trying to kind of be a carbon copy of what Vince was already doing, and it became kind of a little silly. But then they started kind of finding a rhythm. But at the end of the day, you just can't beat the machine, and you can only go so far, even if you're different than. And there was just a lot of things factoring in, to be fair. But I'm with you. Not only with Jim Herd, but a lot of administrations were trying to do the WWE style when traditionally, going back to the Crockett's, you had a lot of that loyal fan base that, sure, you wanted to broaden your horizons, but not too much. You didn't want to stray too much away from the winning formula, like you're saying, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, those matches, the Four Horsemen, the Road Warriors were in there. I mean, to be fair, they were big stars already. They got the platform with Vince, but they were made men in Georgia and Mid
Mm-hmm.
Atlantic and going on in the NWA.
But the problem when I was with the magazines and the NWA was having a really hard time, and the reason they were having a hard time, or WCW it might have been at that point, was because they did have a lot of talent and bad programs. The programs were terrible, and not meaning TV programs, but the angles, the feuds were lame. The way they were being presented was corny. You know what I'm saying? It was like it lost its realistic flavor. And the farther they strayed away from realism, the worse it got.
And it's a cardinal error on
Mm-hmm.
any wrestling promotion's part. And I'm starting to get that. I didn't always, because you kind of you do want to lose your kind of probably your standards as you view them now, because you're looking back at a whole nother or let me phrase that another way. You're kind of looking at it from a unique perspective. Then it's just that you're so correct, though. It's just why go away from what made you successful and why the fans came to the arenas or watched your programming because they wanted something different, but they wanted their kind of wrestling. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, Vince was he wanted to do away with the wrestling, and I did, because if you're going to take it national, I can kind of see both sides. You got to kind of evolve and go a certain route, but at the same time, that's where NWA really had a chance to just pull away, or at least build momentum. I don't know if pull away is necessarily correct, because Vince really got a stronghold everywhere. But to me, just what you brought up there is just really putting it all into just a neat perspective, that if NWA just stay true, were original to themselves instead of
Mm-hmm.
trying to be like Vince's shows, who knows what the future may have held.
That's right. Well, I will say this too. The problem with that era is if people started to believe they were watching a show as opposed to at least a semblance of a sport, it falls apart and dies. I still believe that. I really do. Wrestling should have that suspension of disbelief that you can get lost in a match. There are times when I'll turn on WWE now and I'll just wander into a match, like just off the top of my head, Gunther versus Tommaso Ciampa, right? Tommaso
Yeah,
Ciampa.
Tommaso Ciampa.
And that I tuned in the middle of the match. I went, wow, this is really good. You know, there was no
Hmm.
backstory. I didn't know the backstory. I didn't know anything about it. But there were two really good athletes going at it. I'm like, wow, this was really good. I enjoyed that. That's what you need to have. It can't all be bad comedy and,
No, I mean you've got to at least have a mix.
long programs, between, like, I think the Bloodline is going on only about a year too long. It's the same thing over and over again. Yeah, I can't believe something could be that stagnant and still draw the way it does. But hey, what do I know? Get off my lawn.
Well, no, and I think that's no, and I've often kind of stated too, even when I'm not watching it, how much more of the bloodline, regarding this saga can they carry out. But I think everybody tends to go to Roman Reigns and the other relatives. But to me, there's one common denominator, and we brought him up. I think it's due to Paul Heyman. His genius. I mean, the way he's adapted to the WWE style, coming from territories in WCW. He, to me, is why this thing's, even when it's stagnant, it still holds up, because he's got stars. I'm taking nothing away from Roman Reigns and the way WWE has booked it, but at the same time, I think you got Heyman. I mean, I didn't realize how creatively special Paul Heyman was. I know you probably knew it, but for me, being a younger generation, I didn't fully appreciate, I think, his contributions and his mind for the business.
I remember speaking with Paul Heyman on the phone around 91 or maybe even 90. He was in between big gigs and was actually booking Mario Savoli's IWCCW for a while. And I am telling you, the guy knew everything about wrestling history and angles and would come up with scenarios for his shows that were unique and different. And yeah, he's a wrestling genius, wrestling savant. I will never put down Paul Heyman for his unbelievable wrestling mind. And those are rare. To run a territory, any territory, as long as he did, that takes a lot. I mean, to be that creative and that different and be able to put a fresh coat of paint on stuff that was, some people consider old school. There was nobody like Paul Heyman to do that, to put a new flavor in front of you on television. And he's another wrestling genius. There's no question about it in my mind.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I mean ECW is another great illustration once he got it, and I didn't realize the relationship he and Eddie Gilbert had, talking about Memphis,
Right, right.
some Memphis roots going to Philadelphia.
Oh man,
I
they
think there's a lot of parallels there.
Gilbert and Heyman ran some unbelievable programs in Continental. There were one time he has major feud with, of all people, Pez Watley, who was known by the name of Willie B. Hurt at that point. At some point, I think they ran an angle where, I don't know if you've ever heard of this one. Willie B. Hurt had a son at ringside, and I think Gilbert attacked him, the teenage kid,
Wow.
and the heat that drew, and getting
Oh,
over
I'm sure
like a
people
guy
were
like
ready to kill it.
yeah, and getting over a guy like Pez Watley, who wasn't exactly a major thing, but that thing drew. I mean, the angles they came up with were incredible. I mean, over the top, sure. Just dance that tightrope so it wasn't too offensive in the end. They were able to make it
Yeah,
work.
just that fun line.
I mean, they were
And
hot shot in
Todd
Continental
Gordon,
because
yeah.
they would go up and down in Continental because it was, they would draw, they wouldn't draw, they'd draw, they wouldn't draw. But they had a lot of talent there, and that angle was off the charts. I mean, real heat. My gosh.
See, and that's what to me, even the contemporary style of wrestling still misses. Even when it's compelling, there's not an element that makes me go, "Oh, this is logical. This can really happen." I think because everything has been kind of exposed, that
Mm-hmm.
there's no more kayfabe, and that does make it a lot harder. And I realize that I'm not one to critique booking because I can only attest to it from my opinion. However, I do miss going back when you're watching the classic stuff, even like some mid '90s stuff and late '90s stuff. There was still at least some elements of
Mm-hmm.
not that you want to overly surprise in wrestling, but at least had some ingredients where, hey, I can actually buy this. This may actually could happen. Anymore, it's like, well, it's a little stagey. Everybody can kind of see what's coming. I mean, I don't know if you felt that way before, but I know I have with watching some of the programs today, and that's even coming from somebody that didn't watch wrestling in the mid '90s. But I'm starting to catch on a little bit.
Well, listen, you're off to a heck of a start, my friend, and
Oh well, thank you.
I consider you a new friend,
Oh, I
and
do too.
I'm really glad to make your acquaintance. This is Tyler Peters. The podcast again is Tyler's Takedowns. You can hear it on Spotify. He's also involved with Coastal Championship Wrestling, and it's just the beginning for Tyler, I think. And I'm never wrong about these things, so keep going, man. You're doing a great job.
Oh, I will. And thank you for the kind words and having me on your program.
No problem. Hey, bring me on yours.
Oh, I will. Hey, I want to start opening up
Yeah,
having guests to change it up a little bit. So
yeah.
I definitely will.
Since we had such fun talking, I like to do it again. And this time, you do me.
Yeah, I'll have you on.
Because you know what? I call it, it's helped my podcast over the last few months. I call it cross pollination.
No, it
I go on
does.
their show, they come on mine, and I have been so blessed. Dan and Benny and Brian R. Solomon and like Mayor McCall, we both appeared on each other's shows. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I've probably done 3 or 4 others in that regard. So, and I understand I'm being invited on another podcast soon. So it's like, that's fun. You get to bounce your ideas and concepts off other people.
Well, you
And
do.
it's the next best thing. It's the next best thing to being at a bar, talking to an old friend about wrestling. Like, I don't know if you did this when you were a kid, but I loved it when I was a teenager. You'd sit around and talk about your favorite wrestlers and what you saw on TV. I miss that vibe. And this is
Oh, I do
closest you
too.
can get to it without actually being there.
Yeah, where you just have fun. And we've been so conditioned, this will be for another podcast. I won't get into the weeds here too much, but about this whole, and I'm not doing this to knock on anybody or sound disrespectful, but it's kind of like I equate my wrestling to Christmas. I would much rather not open up the gift and just be surprised and enjoy the process. And if anything that doing kind of wrestling headlines has taught me is I wanted to get away from it. I wanted to just enjoy it. I don't want to be based on rumors and what the latest trend is. I just want to enjoy wrestling for what it was, what it is, however tense you want to use. Because to me, that is ruining the industry, and I think it's been that way for a long time. When it's too much, this person may show up tonight, or they're not happy. I just and I'll get off that soapbox. That's for another time. But that it got me thinking. I always wanted to just enjoy because somebody had posted a while back. When wasn't it nice when we didn't have to find out or learn everything before a show? We just enjoyed it. I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
it's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't understand how that enhances the experience. If somebody's going to show up unexpected at a wrestling card and yet you're reading about it on the internet the day before,
Yeah, what fun is that?
how is that better? How is that better? How is that better? Nobody can keep a secret anymore. It's crazy.
No, because it's getting leaked
Oh,
out.
we could.
Yeah, we could talk. I
If we don't
probably
stop
shouldn't have
now,
went on.
if we don't, if we, if, yeah, if we don't stop now, we're going to keep bringing this kind of stuff up. We'll have plenty of time to do this in the future.
Yeah.
And you're welcome back here. By
Oh,
the way.
thank you.
If you'd like to come back,
Yeah,
I'd like to have
I'd
you
love
back.
to come back.
So like I said, folks, this is Tyler Peters. Look him up on on Facebook. You're also on Facebook too. People could find you there. Right?
I'm on Facebook, and yeah, for sure, they can find me on there.
Yeah. So look for Tyler Peters, an up and coming wrestling personality. Thanks again for being here. I really appreciate
Oh,
it.
hey, you're very welcome, and thank you for allowing me to be a guest on your great program.
Wow. I mean, wow. Tyler Peters. Nice. You know, that's great. There may be hope for this old sport yet. People like that involved. I'm telling you, it's a revelation. Both him and this wrestling federation he's part of, Coastal Championship Wrestling. I really enjoyed all of it, and you should check it out. Something different. Who knows? Maybe we'll start a movement. Maybe we'll see these people rise up through the ranks. That'd be really nice, wouldn't it? I really enjoyed putting this show together immensely. It was different to have somebody that's just emerging on the scene as opposed to, grizzled veterans such as myself, So it's a lot of fun for me to do this. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Find me on Facebook. I'm Bob Smith from PWI in the old days. You'll see me singing with BB King on the lead page to differentiate me from all the other Bob Smiths out there. Our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. All of our shows are there. You don't need an app to listen to the show, although we're on every app you can think of. I've been remiss with saying that. We're just about everywhere. There may be an app or two we're not on. If they are, I don't know what they are. Spotify and Google and Google Podcasts, which is soon to go the way, it's going to end up going. Did you hear about that? It's going to end up being, all their stuff's going to be on YouTube Music. They're going to get rid of Google Podcasts next year. But we're also on YouTube Music. And now we're on YouTube. Yes, you can look at the static, horrible visage of mine as you listen to every show. It's kind of like the Cornette show, only it never changes. There's no, beautiful, funny artwork. There's just our usual logo. That's good enough for me. Who'd want to see this face anyway? I mean, come on, really. But we are available on regular YouTube now, as well as YouTube Music, and Spotify, and Podbean, which I really like, and Podbay, which I really like a lot too. And all of them. If you could name a podcast app, we're probably there. So find us if you haven't found us already. What am I talking about? You're already here. Duh. Anyway, where else can you find me? Facebook. Like I said, I'm Bob Smith singing with BB King on the lead page. Write to us at outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Just outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Also on our Outdated Wrestling Hour.buzzsprout.com. You can find out about the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club, where for a nominal fee, you can be part of the production of this program. Yes, you can. You can take part in Zoom meetings, and once in a while, I'll give away a valuable prize. Well, kind of valuable. Actually, not valuable at all, but you'll have fun talking wrestling with all of us. And I'm setting up another Zoom meeting, Zoom-style meeting, as we speak. But you got to be a member of the fan club to be part of the meeting. So if you want to talk wrestling with us, come on and check it out. My name is Bob Smith. This is the Outdated Wrestling Hour, a decidedly different podcast where we look back at the history of pro wrestling. I didn't mean to sound like Lord Alfred Hayes there. I'm sorry. In any event, we'll see you next week. We come out every Friday, and we'll see you next week. Take good care of yourself, and I want nothing but peace for you, your family, all your friends, your co-workers, everybody. Peace out, yo. Oh, and before we sign off, I just want to make note that we will not have a show on December 22 for the holiday, but we will return on December 29th with our year-end Best of OWH. So look forward for that. If you will, we'll see you on December 29th.